Wayne's transformation into the Batman was designed by tragedy and determination. As the murder of his parents caused deep guilt, the intense desire to protect the innocent from devastation on any scale has been the focal point of his vigilante persona. While there have been many triumphs over the last 82 years within Batman's pursuits for justice, many failures have equally and personally defined him as a hero. Not being able to save the life of Jason Todd from the hands of the Joker has been noted by Batman himself as perhaps one of his greatest failures when it comes to the Batman family. But when observing the Dark Knight's infamous and intriguing rogues gallery, the one villain that continually reminds Bruce's Batman of the imperfections within his own heroism is Harvey Dent's Two-Face. While you can argue that the Red Hood falling into a vat of chemicals courtesy of the Batman and transforming him into the clown prince of crime, the Joker, can solidify as one of Batman's greatest failures when it comes to villains, Bruce Wayne's personal relationship with District Attorney Harvey Dent, his mental and physical descent into the villain Two-Face, and Bruce's guilt over this descent, both as the Man and the Cowl, can be seen as Two-Face's existence really gets under Batman's skin, actually showcasing that the idea of rehabilitating all of these criminals and villains that stalk the streets of Gotham on the nightly is quite unrealistic, which can put into question Bruce Wayne's overall goals when it comes to his vigilante lifestyle and purpose. In this video, we will not only discuss a history of Harvey Dent's Two-Face over the last 79 years in DC Comics, but also highlight tales that showcases the struggles that the Caped Crusader has with Harvey Dent's fate of becoming the ultimate obsessor of duality within the DC universe. Before we learn more about this classic rogue, why don't you subscribe to this channel and follow History of the Batman across all other social media, including Instagram at History of the Batman. It is such a fun time, let me tell you, and I would honestly appreciate your support. With the Batman debuting in 1939, and even within that first year of him in Detective Comics, his roster of villains continually began to grow, from having Catwoman to the Joker, and Bill Finger and Bob Kane, the co-creators of the Batman, wanted to continue building this very infamous roster of villains that would become so popular amongst all fans of The Dark Knight. This included the introduction of Harvey Apollo Kent in the pages of Detective Comics issue 66 that was published on June 20th, 1942. In Bill Finger's The Crimes of Two-Face, Harvey Apollo Kent, Gotham City's handsome district attorney, had his life change when, during the murder trial of mob boss Maroni, in retaliation, Maroni throws acid in Harvey's face, with some splashing on one half due to the Batman, an eyewitness to Maroni's crimes, intervening. From learning that the only plastic surgeon that can help Harvey return to normal has been taken to a Nazi concentration camp, to everyone around him, including his romantic partner Gilda, sees himself as a terrifying monster, Harvey Kent has a mental dilemma to become good or evil. To aid in his decision, Kent used Maroni's double-headed silver coin, a piece of case evidence, scarring one of the sides with a knife. With the flip of a coin, his fate was decided to become the new villain of the city he originally protected. Now, if you know anything about Two-Face, this is the very common origin story that Two-Face has within the Batman universe for probably the next almost 80 years. But what's interesting about this introduction is that it even showcases Batman trying to reason with Harvey Kent about turning to a life of crime. And Batman is even upset when Kent is just down to kill him, even though the two were actually pretty good friends. The issue ends with Batman even trying to help Harvey, telling him to turn himself in and plead temporary insanity because the courts know his great track record of being a fantastic district attorney in Gotham. And in between this time, he can wait until the plastic surgeon is able to come back to Gotham to help fix his face. But unfortunately, Harvey is already gone and has already decided to let the coin decide his fate, which I believe really hurts his friend Bruce Wayne's feelings, which wouldn't it hurt your feelings if you were trying to help one of your friends do the right thing or not turn to something horrible and they just won't listen to good reason? I mean, I think we all at some point in our lives can relate to something of that sort. In a rare case for Golden Age comics, this story was a two-parter, perhaps reflecting the villain involved, and continued in 1942's Detective Comics issue 68. In Bill Finger's The Man Who Led a Double Life, after Harvey was incarcerated for a year, he escaped and decided to go on crime or charity sprees in Gotham that resulted in the flip of his coin. Batman and Robin have to stop their once friend from his schemes. Also, once again in this story, Batman tries to help his former friend Harvey try to steer away from leading a life of just horrible crimes and murders. Despite even choosing not to kill Batman when he had the opportunity, Harvey Kent still stayed on the criminal path and decided to let the coin choose for him, which ultimately made him and Batman enemies. Seemingly, a possible reform for Harvey Kent came in Bill Finger's 1943 story, The End of Two-Face, in Detective Comics 80, when Dr. Eckhart came back to Gotham City and fixed Harvey's face back to its Apollo standards. The courts gave him a reduced sentence and he was imprisoned for only a year. After his release, he married his fiancée Gilda. Although he returned to being an upstanding lawyer, even though for the last 2 years he was committing horrible crimes, including murder, but let's just forget about all that. It's whatever. Others during the 1950s would actually take up the Two-Face persona, with Batman and Robin having to clear Harvey Kent's name because they know that he has been a changed man ever since the plastic surgery. Two-Face number 2 comes in Bill Finger and Bob Kane's The Return of Two-Face from 1948's Batman issue 50, when Harvey's butler Wilkins puts on makeup to resemble Two-Face and commits crimes. Batman number 50 is actually the first time Harvey Kent is changed to Harvey Dent, which is the common name that you know this character as, because then they wanted to separate Harvey Kent from the very popular DC character Clark Kent, aka Superman, because let's face it, Harvey and Clark are just not the same at all. Two-Face number 3 appears in Bill Finger and Dick Sprang's The New Crimes of Two-Face from 1951's Batman issue 68, when actor Paul Sloan portrays Harvey Dent, aka Two-Face, on a Gotham real crime TV show. Sloan on set was sabotaged with actual acid splashed on his face by an envious stage master. Sloan then decides to use the scarred prop coin and begin committing crimes as the new Two-Face. The fourth imposter Two-Face, makeup expert George Blake, starts to commit crimes themed with the number 2 after he paints his face to look like the original Two-Face in Don Cameron's The Double Crimes of Two-Face from 1952's Detective Comics issue 187. After almost a decade of Harvey Dent being a simple Gotham City lawyer without a horrible track record of murdering innocent people, unfortunately Dent goes back to the Two-Face persona, and that is seen in David Vernerine and Dick Sprang's Two-Face Strikes Again from 1952's Batman issue 81. Harvey Dent is caught in an unexpected explosion which redid the plastic surgery of his face. After the flip of his coin, he decided to be a rogue again. Captured by Batman and discovering his face has gone through too much damage to be fixed back to normal, Dent accepts his fate and remains the dangerous villain Two-Face. Just a random fun fact that within this story, Two-Face ties up Batman and Robin and puts them on a huge coin and decides to flip them, which could ultimately flip them to their death. And this little bit was actually seen in the 1992 Batman the Animated Series episode Almost Got Him. So that is just another reason to absolutely love that series, just pulling this history straight from the comics. Love to see it. Throughout the Golden Age, Batman continually not only tried to reform his friend Harvey Dent from his crimes as Two-Face, but also stopped Dent's imposters, knowing that his friend was actually a reformed, changed man. Which I think would make Batman even more guilt-ridden, because he knew and saw that his friend was actually back to normal, tried to lead a good life, had his fiance, and wasn't committing any crimes for such a long period of time. But unfortunately, the coin was just calling him and he just had to be this horrible villain. And I honestly think that personally, even in these early Golden Age 1940s, 1950s stories, shows that Batman has a difficult time coming to terms with the fact that his once very good friend, stand-up citizen of Gotham, would just turn into this horrible criminal that he can't help return to his good roots. But even after Harvey Dent returned to the guise of Two-Face, he really didn't appear in comics or any other media until the 1970s, where the murderous yet quite gimmicky rogue became a more darker persona that would match the dark detective era that Batman was immersed in going into the Bronze Age of DC Comics. As we have discussed many times on this channel, entering the 1970s, Batman will return to his more gothic roots that were established by Bill Finger and Bob Kane in the late 1930s and the early 1940s to try to step away from the enveloping pop aesthetic that surrounded the Batman and his mythos, courtesy of the extreme popularity of the 1960s Batman TV show starring Adam West. Similar to the Joker's return to more murderous antics in 1973's Batman issue 251, creators Denny O'Neil, Neil Adams, and Dick Giordano did the same for Harvey Dent's Two-Face by reintroducing him back into the continuity in the story Half an Evil that really transformed him into a darker and more deeper criminal. In 1971's Batman issue 234, when Batman stops a robbery at the Gotham Museum, he figures out his employer is one of the strangest criminal geniuses who ever lived, Two-Face, who has a larger scheme of finding secret treasure on an old ship and attaining it no matter how many lives are lost. Batman tries to reach Harvey's good side, asking him if it even exists anymore, when Harvey threatens to drown an innocent man aboard the ship. Cause like, for real, is that necessary? Like, you gonna drown this man for what? Like, even when Batman is doing a little flashback moment in the comic, when he looks back at Harvey's transformation, rehabilitation, and then descent back into the persona, it's almost a rather sad account, because at one point he knows that his friend Harvey was such a good citizen of Gotham, and the fact that he is now this murderous villain is very troublesome for him to kind of wrap his brain around. Neil Adams' art itself presents Harvey Dent's Two-Face as a more grim than gimmick figure within Batman's Rogues Gallery, steering away from the initial pop green colors of Dent's scarred face from the 1940s and the 1950s. While we continue on looking at future Two-Face stories, and you'll see the different bright colors kind of manifesting themselves in the scarred part of Two-Face's facade, the fact that Neil Adams wanted to portray Harvey Dent's Two-Face in a more realistic manner to really bring it away from the camp aesthetic that we've all were used to during the 1960s is very telling in trying to make this character not as gimmicky or funny or just obsessed with the number 2 and make him a darker figure within Batman's Rogues Gallery. I think that initial look at Two-Face coming back into continuity is very important when trying to understand this very complex character. Dent's Two-Face would continually have appearances within Batman publications, including being one of the first 2 inmates in Arkham Hospital, which debuted in 1974, was created by Denny O'Neil and Irv Novick. Of course, the other inmate is no one other than the Joker, because who else would it be? But in Marv Wolfman and Irv Novik's 1980 tale, Twice Dies the Batman, Harvey Dent and Batman confront one another in court when Two-Face plans on killing the Batman once and for all so he could be with the love of his life, Gilda. Batman tries to talk to Harvey, saying they were once good friends and he knows that he is a good person and should seek help. After Gilda stops Dent from murdering the Caped Crusader, Harvey realizes that he needs help and is willing to go into Arkham for rehabilitation, with Gilda saying she would wait for him. When Two-Face takes over and Harvey isn't able to make the decision to go into rehabilitation, I think that slowly eats away at Batman, and it really does make him question his vigilante role within Gotham. Within Marv Wolfman's story, on the last page, Batman tells Alfred that the fact that Harvey wants to try to fix himself and try to get help and puts himself in Arkham and really doesn't want to be this criminal anymore, he literally says that this justifies all of the horrors and hells that he has gone through while being the vigilante of Gotham. So I know that when it doesn't work out like this, which we will see in many stories as we continue this look at Harvey Dent, Batman continually struggles when this or any rogue decides to keep being the horrible villain that they are within their metropolis. As we enter the 1980s, Harvey Dent's Two-Face would continually appear in different Batman publications. From being shown to suffer from the weight of his own mental scars in Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns, to almost being killed by Jason Todd's Robin because Harvey was responsible for his father's death in Max Allan Collins' Second Chance. Even within this post-Crisis on Infinite Earths continuity within the late 1980s, Harvey Dent's Two-Face was slowly transforming into a more dangerous yet tragic and at times sympathetic villain within Batman's continually evolving rogues gallery. And it is easy to argue that one era that truly defined Two-Face's evolution was the era of the 1990s. Andrew Helfer in 1990 penned a new Harvey Dent origin story that would align with the more modern take on the Batman mythos, and that was published in Batman Annual issue number 14, which gave this character a more tragic origin story than it already was. In Eye of the Beholder, as Commissioner Gordon, District Attorney Harvey Dent and the Batman agreed to create a successful policing system for Gotham, secretly the mental state of Dent is deteriorating. Harvey's classic origin of becoming Two-Face is seen, which pushes his schizophrenia and intense paranoia to the surface. This resulted in him using the only item his abusive, alcoholic father gave him, a two-headed coin. After Batman and the correct flip of a coin is able to stop Harvey from killing his father, he is taken to Arkham Asylum and has plastic surgery on his face. However, a voice in his head says he can never turn back to being one man. He violently destroys his face, clawing at it with his hands. Dent now knows that he will forever be Two-Face. His mind can have it no other way. Eye of the Beholder gave a much deeper three-dimensional look at the descent of Harvey Dent into the villain Two-Face, transforming his gimmicky obsession with the number 2 to something much more troubling, both physically and mentally. Helfer's tale inspired much of the following media within the 1990s when it came to discussing the villain Two-Face. From one of my favorite stories, Bruce Timm's Two of a Kind, which is a Batman black and white tale, to the fan favorite Kevin Altieri 1992 Batman the Animated Series 2-part episode, Two-Face. These 2 episodes not only showcase Harvey's classic origin to a new generation of Batman fans, but also add the element of Big Bad Harv when he sees a hypnotherapist, which, before Dent's scarring, provides an audible switch in personalities for the first time in any media. Even with the voice differentiation and the drastic visual changes from his clothes to his face, Two-Face was seen as a sympathetic road through the eyes of his friend Bruce Wayne aka the Batman, who even has had nightmares that include Harvey Dent and his deceased parents, Thomas and Martha Wayne, asking Bruce why he didn't save them from their tragedies. And the fact that Bruce even has nightmares about not being able to save his friend from this tragic fate, along with not being able to save his parents when he was young, being gunned down by Joe Chill, just shows that he has immense guilt over this failure of not saving the people that he truly cares about and loves. Batman having tons of guilt and trauma is just part of his whole foundation, I believe. In the end of Two-Face Part 2, Batman defeats Two-Face by throwing several silver dollars in the air, along with Two-Face's scarred coin that makes his decisions for him. Unable to find his coin, he crumbles under the pressure and lies on the floor, illustrating the internal struggle this rogue will face in his forever obsession of fate in animation and comics. Two-Face's internal struggle and Batman's guilt-filled mission to try to save his friend from this life of crime will continually be in the forefront of Two-Face and Batman stories throughout the 1990s and well into the 2000s. While Two-Face's big screen debut in Joel Schumacher's 1995 film Batman Forever, portrayed by Tommy Lee Jones, leans more to the gimmicky side of the character seen in the 1940s and the 1950s, which makes sense because Batman Forever was heavily inspired by the Golden and Silver Age comics of the time. So if you didn't like Tommy Lee Jones's Two-Face because it was too bright and colorful and silly, it was supposed to be. Harvey Dent's transformation into Two-Face was given a modern revival that focused on both Harvey Dent and Batman's struggles within trying to figure out what truly justice means, and that is in Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale's 13-issue arc, The Long Halloween, which is celebrating its 25th anniversary this year. In this arc that began in 1996, the Dark Knight in his year one days as a vigilante works with family men Commissioner James Gordon and District Attorney Harvey Dent to simultaneously take down the Roman and the Falcone crime boss family and find the identity of the Holiday Killer, a murderer who strikes on major holidays in Gotham City beginning on Halloween. While Harvey deals with psychological troubles along with the pressures of starting a family with his wife Gilda, once his classic fate becomes realized and is scarred by acid courtesy of Maroni, sadly Batman and Gordon believe that Dent is indeed the Holiday Killer. Even when the Two-Face persona is fully realized, his involvement with the holiday killings is discovered, and he commits crimes such as breaking people out of Arkham Asylum to even killing Falcone himself. As Batman and Gordon are apprehending Harvey Dent, Batman sees how this good justice system has failed in so many ways, with seeing that the DA is the actual guilty party. While there are tons and tons of stories that has Batman trying to stop the corruption of Gotham within the courts, within the police department, the fact that a once good man that he knew personally would fall into this corrupt system is quite disheartening for the Dark Knight. These stories and others, such as Alan Grant's 1997 Shadow the Back art Jonas, that dives deeper into Dent's distorted mental state when he starts killing his own crew because Harvey Dent is trying to stop Two-Face from doing horrible deeds. It's literally an internal battle between the two personalities, and it is a fantastic story I recommend. The 1990s was the pivotal moment for Two-Face's origin to not only get a revival, but to also be given a deeper analysis of what this villain truly can be and what this villain means within the Batman mythos. And he isn't just some colorful costume rogue running around doing silly stuff, but also suffering personally on a much deeper level. Batman witnessing his friend going down this quite horrible path is something that is really hard for him to comprehend or even accept within his own vigilante guise. As the 1990s started to roll out, Two-Face was still a present figure within the Batman universe, including within the 1999 saga Batman No Man's Land. Batman and Robin, Tim Drake, have to stop Two-Face, who is holding a trial against Commissioner Gordon while forcing Renee Montoya to stand by as the bailiff with her parents held hostage in Greg Rucka's jurisprudence in the pages of Batman issues 572 and Detective Comics issue 739. Entering the 2000s, Two-Face is actually still committing quite heinous acts, one being outing Renee Montoya as a lesbian at the Gotham City Police Department and then framing her for murder just so he can have her all to himself because he's obsessed with her. And that is seen in the Gotham Central story Half a Life, which is award-winning and amazing. That whole book is amazing. Very short-lived, but Gotham Central, such perfection. But Harvey Dent does attempt again to stop being Two-Face by enlisting Thomas Elliot, aka Hush, to perform plastic surgery on his face to make him look like Harvey Dent again. And of course, this is in exchange in helping take down the Batman, and that is seen in Jeff Loeb and Jim Lee's 2003 arc Batman Hush. However, Hush is disappointed when, even though Dent was able to have his face fixed by Hush, he double crosses Hush and he decides to help Batman and go on the right side of the law. And once Batman sees that his friend is back to his old self, he wants him to help him protect the city of Gotham, knowing that he is truly a good man. When during the events of 1 year later, where Batman and Robin were absent, Bruce entrusts a reformed Two-Face to keep law and order in the city, with other officials such as Commissioner Gordon gone in this DC event. This is short-lived, however, due to the fact that when the dynamic duo return, seen in the 2006 arc Face the Face, they observe many murders and crimes that look familiar to the work of Two-Face. When Batman confronts him, it triggers Dent into ruining his plastic surgery and remaining as the villain Two-Face. In stories from Batman Hush to Face the Face, Batman really tries to give his trust to his old friend Harvey Dent, even though like 5 minutes ago he was a crazed villain who was just murdering people and committing horrendous crimes. But Batman trusts his friend so much and knows deep down that he is a good person, that he is willing to entrust the safety of Gothamites in the hands of this still villain. I'm sorry. The fact that Harvey cannot stay away from his villainous persona that is wrapped up in mental illness is quite disheartening to the Batman. Because really, if you think about it, while Batman loves dressing up in the cape and the cowl and going out every night and fighting criminals and protecting the innocent, he wants to see a figure like Harvey Dent, a successful, brilliant district attorney, lawyer that is cleaning up the streets of Gotham without having to wear a mask. And ultimately, that is what Batman wants. He wants people like that to exist in Gotham to help keep the city safe. And I think a perfect example of this can be seen in Christopher Nolan's 2008 film The Dark Knight, starring Christian Bale and Aaron Eckhart as Batman and Harvey Dent, respectively. For Bruce Wayne, despite his issues with Harvey dating Rachel Dawes, the love of his life, he sees Dent as the one person in Gotham that can clean up the streets from crime and not have to wear a mask or hide his identity, which he somewhat admires. So it is quite awful when, after Joker's plans, not only does Rachel die, but half of Harvey Dent's face is burned in the explosion. After having a talk with Joker in the hospital with his lucky coin, Dent now takes up the identity of Two-Face that leads to his tragic demise. Eckhart's brilliant performance as Harvey Dent shows the evolution of Dent's lawfulness slowly descend, seen in his sometimes aggressive and violent actions in court or even in interrogations, which all results into him becoming the villain Two-Face and having his fate decided by the flip of his lucky coin. And it's a very good Two-Face origin story for the big screen, by the way. Like, it's it's as good as it can be in terms of live action. But if we return to comics, Harvey Dent's origin is tragic as usual. There's pre-New 52 stories such as Two-Face 2 and his new, somehow more tragic origin story in the New 52's A Tale of Two Faces, when a scorned, convicted, attempted murderer, Ellen McKellen, escapes, goes to Harvey's home, kills his wife Gilda, and pours acid on half of Dent's face to truly show how two-faced he is, resulting in Harvey's transformation into Two-Face. Sometime after, Aaron returned to seek revenge, with Harvey confronting Batman, actually blaming him for Gilda's death because it was his fault that he convinced him to try the case. This leads to Harvey Dent's attempt to take his own life, but he survived the gunshot to the head. But a follow-up to these events, and one that I wanted to highlight to kind of round out our look at the relationship between Two-Face and Batman and how troubling it is, comes in 2016's All-Star Batman, which was written by Scott Snyder and illustrated by John Romita Jr. In My Own Worst Enemy, Harvey believes after his suicide attempt that only the Harvey side exists and asks the Batman to literally go on a 500-mile journey to gain the cure so he can stay as Harvey forever. Bruce, being Harvey's longtime friend despite the troubles, agrees, and they travel together, fighting literal assassins along the way. All for Batman to discover that this was a ruse and the cure would actually make Harvey Dent go full Two-Face. Batman, of course, ruins Harvey's plans and actually gives him an antidote that would make Harvey both Dent and Two-Face, because Batman cannot fathom to think that his friend would be fully Two-Face for the rest of his life. As Batman continues to battle with Two-Face in both comics and animation, including the new 2021 DC animated two-part film Batman The Long Halloween, Bruce's trials with trying to bring his good friend Harvey Dent away from the horrific criminal lifestyle that is Two-Face is one of the most guilt-ridden ones I have seen in all of Batman's long history. For Two-Face has proven time and time again that the fate of his entire life, all of his actions, will all whittle down to the flip of a coin. As stated in the beginning of our video, Batman, over his 82-year history, has witnessed many failures within his crusade for justice, whether in events or even particular figures that he has come across. But when it comes to villains, perhaps the most personal struggle that Batman faces when it comes to trying to reform one of the many costume criminals that he has come across over the last 8 decades in DC Comics is, of course, Two-Face, because as both a friend and an enemy, failure is unfortunately quite common within their dynamic. And a common theme seen with Batman failing a mission really results in self-loathing, or believing that he is failing the mantle altogether. So from the stories that we have explored of this villainous character over the last 79 years, you can argue that the greatest personal failure that Batman has faced while protecting the city of Gotham is Harvey Dent's Two-Face, the ultimate obsessor of fate within the DC universe. Thank you guys so much for watching this video discussing the greatest failure within Batman's history is the creation of Harvey Dent's Two-Face. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a bat thumbs up. While we have not discussed every single Two-Face story that has been out there since his 1942 debut, I do have linked in the description below some trade paperbacks that if you want to explore more Two-Face stories, especially many of the ones that we discussed in this video, you can add them to your Batman collection if you haven't already. And let me know in the comments below your favorite Two-Face story or your thoughts on the Harvey Dent Two-Face character himself. As always, all of my social media is linked in the description below, including Instagram at History of the Batman, so why don't you go to follow me, become a Gothamite, check out the rest of my videos on this channel, and of course, please subscribe to this channel so you can become part of this Batman community. It would mean so much to me. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll have much more History of the Batman soon, right here on YouTube. Remember, Gothamites, all about peace, love, and Batman. Bye.